All right, folks, it's time for another edition of the World Edition. We've got all kinds of things happening in the world. And I do have a question for Nick in a minute because there was an unusual news story that I saw when I was researching things last night. But before we get to that, we'll get to the other serious news of the day and all along those kind of spaces. But definitely there was a punishingly brutal report in the UK that was talking about Boris Johnson. Apparently, they were saying that he deliberately misled Parliament over their perceived COVID lockdowns during the height of that particular pandemic. So there is all kinds of news about that going on in the world. And of course, there is a Greece boat disaster. A capsized boat had 100 children in the hold, according to the BBC. And apparently, they were, I believe, coming from the area of Libya. So that is where it was going on. And they are saying that at least 79 are dead after that overcrowded migrant vessel sank over in that particular case and along those lines. So, like I said, it sunk off of Greece and hundreds may be missing as well. And it was a perilous route to Europe. And that is what happened in that particular migrant case. I know there was some other migrant news from the United States, and I'll be getting to that as well. And of course, we do know that that war between Ukraine and Russia is going on, and apparently there is some tension between the Kremlin and the Russian mercenaries. So there might be some discord going on in Russia in the way that they are doing the fight and all in that space. And Cyclone Biperjoy is heading toward India and Pakistan, and they're expected to evacuate more than 170,000 people in that particular area. So that is a severe cyclonic storm that is heading in that general part of the world. So that is some of the things that are going on in world politics. There is also in India a Indian wrestling chief of all things that has been charged with sexual harassment. So Baraj Basham Sharam Singh has been accused of sexual harassment of female wrestlers. So we might get into some discussion around that case as well. And of course, it seems like there is a mass migration of millionaires from certain parts of the world to Dubai and other parts of the world. So I did see that. It looks like there is a mass migration of folks that are heading out of places like India and China and a number of other places. And that is one of the stories that I saw that folks may be interested in and all in that kind of space. So definitely that is one of the interesting stories that I saw in the news. And, folks are, I guess, thinking that they want to get out of those particular areas. So India is to lose 6,500 millionaires in 2023, and many of them are headed to Dubai and Singapore. And they are saying that some of them are expected to leave China this year as well. Than any other country. So more millionaires are expected to leave China this year than any other country as the end of COVID zero allows them to finally relocate. So the UA is ranked first globally to attracting new millionaires in 2022. And I know that I think Shaquille has been visiting that area, so he might have some ideas as to why it is so popular for the fine folks from India and from the fine folks in China as well. And New Zealand has got a meth problem. So New Zealand has seized a record amount of meth in maple syrup jugs from Canada. That's right. The drug syndicate had meth in Canadian maple syrup cannoli oil bound for down under. That's what the authorities have said. So apparently that is what is going on. And they found $150 million worth of meth in these maple syrup containers and all in that kind of space. And then archaeologists in Peru found a 3,000-year-old mummy in Lima. So that is something else that I am seeing as well. And if you're wondering about Nigeria, it looks like the Nigerian powerful central bank chief has lost his seat in the government. So we'll see how that plays out in another part of the world and all in that kind of space. So he's been suspended. Their stock market capitalization has risen by in 1.2 TN, and not being a financial person, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but some of those that are more financial may be able to explain to me those terms and what that all is in that space. So that is some of the things that I am seeing in the world. There are other news items as well, including some things that were going on in Israel. And of course, we've got things happening here in the United States as well. So definitely it does look like there are a number of news stories that we might get to and find out what people have got to say about these things. By the way, Germany is adopting a more muscular security plan, and Russia and China have been singled out in Scholz's new national security strategy. So that is something that is going on that folks may be interested in hearing about as well. So definitely that is some of the world news that I am finding out about on this particular day. And we'll get to some other items and some other discussions and see what folks have got to say that they have found out as well. And by the way, there may be another new world order, because that's what the Iranian president is saying, is he is visiting Venezuela. So he is definitely doing that right in America's back. There is he's hailing the new world order as he was meeting with the Maduro in Venezuela. So I guess Iran and Venezuela are trying to claim that they are part of a new world order and all along those lines. I might get to some other stories that I can find as well. I did say that I did have a quick question for none other than Nick. So we're going to get to Nick and we'll hear some of the other things that are going on. But that was just a quick summary of some of the things that I found out in the news and everything. But I heard this interesting story yesterday, Nick. That's why I want to bring you up first and everything. And I got to find the particular details. But there was a young 28-year-old woman that is facing charges because she masqueraded as a 17-year-old. So she masqueraded as a 17-year-old in order to go into high school. And when I first saw this story, I was thinking that she was a predator type, and that's why she was masquerading as a 28-year-old and all. But as I read the story further, it seems that the reason that she did this is because she wants to learn English. So I think that she is from like Mexico or something along those lines. And so her and her I want to say her mom were the ones that kind of conspired in this story and kind of got the records falsified, and that is why she is facing these legal charges and everything. But like I said, it seems to me that we might be wanting to encourage people to come here if they're going to learn a language and they want to learn the English language, because that is the reason that apparently she went to high school, was that she wanted to learn the English language and was too old to learn the English language. I know that there are schools that you can learn English as a second language, even in the college and the community college ranks. But I guess she decided she wanted to try the high school rank. But when I heard that story, I was like, Nick's an attorney. I've got to bring this topic up to him and see what he's got to say about this and everything. Because like I said, when I first heard this story, my first inclination was she's going there because she wants to catch up with some boys and be like a predator type. But apparently that was not the reason. And even some people that were admitting that they had to charge her was saying that it was a noble cause for her trying to learn English and everything. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about this.
Well, I assume, Mark, she was committing fraud.
That would be it.
Trying to get into school. And I'm also going to assume, because I don't know the facts of the case, that she was going to a public school, which taxpayers are paying for. So now let's just cut through all the garbage. So you have a person who commits fraud. So you, Mark, can pay for them to learn English. How do you feel?
I don't feel well about that. Like I said,
not too good. Okay, so the thing is, there's some basic principles that we have in the United States. One thing is don't commit fraud. Okay, and she frauded her age, so she go to school to learn the English language when she could have done the responsible thing and paid a private tutor for her to learn English. But no, she wanted Mark to pay, and all the listeners to pay for her education to learn English. And that's where the problem is. So, I don't know if she was charged civilly or criminally, but, it's a real problem, committing fraud.
Good morning. Nick, question. Why is it fraud? Why can't a person identify whatever age they want to be?
Well, Lee, since
what are the guidelines?
I do pension plans. Notice National Pension Partners. Okay.
No, I understand.
We have discrimination is available based on age, length of service, and compensation. Let's imagine that, Lee, you wanted to, because you identify to be an older person like me, and you wanted to be on Medicare. So you identify that your age is 65. Whether you like it or not, That is fraud. You're frauding your
Right.
age.
I'm saying, what is the criteria with what one can identify as?
It
Is
doesn't
biology? Is
that
it
whole thing, that whole thing of identification is
Right.
the reason why wokeism is dead. Just because you identify doesn't mean it's absolutely true. So you can identify to be whatever you want. It doesn't matter. The truth matters. And the truth is, she's not 18 or under. She's not eligible to go to high school. The truth is, if you're not age 65, you're not eligible to go on Medicare. I don't care what you identify yourself as. You identify yourself to be 80 years old. It doesn't matter. The truth matters.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Nick. I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I'm saying is, why in so much of society can biological men pretend or identify or?
Okay.
I'm sorry?
See, the thing is, the media is making that up. They cannot. As a matter of fact, the North Carolina.
They cannot what? They've been participating in sports.
Because, okay, the North Carolina state, rightfully so, passed a law that if you're a biological male, you cannot jump in and say, I identify as a female and go play female sports. Rightfully so. So all this, hey, I identify as.
But you're aware this has been going on for years. They've been doing that. Swimming and other sports.
No. They get kicked out. In other words,
that's not true. College swimming. University of Pennsylvania. Leah Thomas.
Well, I don't care what you guys do up in Pennsylvania. This is the great state of North Carolina. If you guys in Pennsylvania want to be binary and woke, go right ahead. But that is not the law in the state of North Carolina that I know of at this point in time that was just passed. And in my opinion, rightfully so. Now what they didn't do, Lee, and I found this interesting, they allowed females to go ahead and play in male sports. I find that to be wrong also because they can be.
Nick, as far as I know, there's a big difference.
What?
The big difference is the male sports are not male sports. They're just sports. Women can go and play in the NBA and NFL, what have you, because they're not male sports. It's all comers. Women's sports was specifically set up because the imbalance in performance abilities between males and females, and women were boxed out, which is why we have Title IX. Specifically because women are at a disadvantage.
Males and females to be in separate sports. They don't commingle them. And frankly, rightfully so. Because no matter how you
hold on a second, I'm going to bring in some of our other experts as well. So I want to hear from Sasha, and actually I had a question for Sasha as well, because one of the stories I didn't get to was apparently there is a bank that has frozen its ties with the AIIB after they are claiming that particular bank has communist dominance and all in that space. So they are definitely freezing their ties with that Beijing-based development bank over claims of that controlled by the Communist Party. So I was wondering if you knew anything about this being in the Canadian area, and if you had any thoughts or news about this, as apparently this was latest news from Canada.
Wonderful. I'm not following every news from Canada, by the way, because some of the news are basically they're consuming your time, and my time is at premium because I'm very busy with trading, and in the last 6 months I've accumulated profits of 163%. So the news from Canada are quite irrelevant at this moment. However, I want to mention something about the sport issue, what you discussed a few minutes ago. I'm aware that, for example, in chess Olympiads, which I've visited many times, each country is putting two teams. One is the national team and women's team.
Yeah.
What that means that in women's team, only women are eligible to play, and in national team, anyone eligible to play. Okay, that's how it's done in chess. Maybe other sports I'm not aware, but I would be very surprised that any woman would try to make it.
Sasha,
or basketball team or anything.
Sasha, the problem is women playing in men's sport is dangerous for men because they destroy your ego. So I have mine
Sasha,
destroyed by
yeah, one second. Sasha, can you explain why women need their own sport in chess? It's not a physical sport.
It is a sport. I'm sorry. Chess is a sport.
Okay, but, but Nick, that's not what I said.
Okay,
That's not what I said, Nick.
I'm sorry. Chess.
I didn't say it wasn't a sport.
NASCAR.
I didn't say that.
A car. What's physical about driving a car? Nothing. If NASCAR is a sport,
I beg to differ, Nick.
Because you're picking up pieces
as somebody who used to train.
Nick, I think women can compete in NASCAR. Why can't women? Why do women need their own chess category? Sasha.
Okay, I think we've covered that question a few times already, including here. And all I can say is that chess is a very specific area of brain functions which are different. Women, I'm sorry to say, and men, it's just different. I'm not saying that men are better at chess.
Just different.
They're different. And that particular, the division of left brain and right brain hemisphere, in fact, unfortunately, in chess for women, that brain division, the brain hemispheres, is heavily in favor of males. And this is why males are, let's see, if you take 100 top players in a world, there will be typically 99 men and 1 woman. And that's going to happen for the next 2,500 years, unfortunately.
So why don't you want to say that men are better than women there, Sasha? I mean, that's what the numbers show.
That's very simple. And the numbers and statistics, and just ask anybody. It just proves the point that the best female will be...
How misogynistic is that?
Sasha, hold on a second. Sasha, hold on a second. Sasha and Shaquille. Hold on. No, hold on a second, because one of the arguments that I've heard made is that... Hold on a second, Shaquille. Shaquille, hold on a second. One of the arguments I've heard that has been made, and I think it is a legitimate argument, but I want to hear what people think about this, is that most folks will say that if you look at the NBA, that the abilities of the men are actually better. But if you look at the way the game is played, women actually play it more the way the game was designed. So they play it more in the fundamental style of the way the game was designed. So do you think that that is a legitimate argument? Because I've heard that argument that the WNBA is more of a pure version of the sport of basketball.
Yeah, Mark, you're right.
You put the best women against the best men. Who's going to win?
Wait a sec. If you will throw away Jokic and many other leading players, then perhaps men will be playing in the style of women. But if you will keep in the game all the stars and all the dominant male players, then women's players, it's just a different game. It's happened to be called basketball, but it's a very, very different game. If you will look at the transition, if you will look at the attacking abilities, defensive abilities, it's a very different game. I think women should not play basketball at all. You know what they should play? There is a game by the name handball. Handball is kind of a, it doesn't benefit taller players. Handball was
very good at it. So
handball was invented in Europe, so the not so tall players could enjoy a basketball type game without being 2.5 meters tall. So women, because they are not generally tall, most of them, so they should play handball, and handball should be promoted. And it's a very interesting game, very dynamic, and that's something.
Well, Sasha, one couple of things. One, nobody answered my question, because I've had the argument that I've heard from both women and men is that actually women play the game more fundamental. I heard what you said, Lee, and yeah, if it was one-on-one, even including some of the street games. But there's some women that can hold their own in street basketball and everything. That there are the men will probably win more often. But that's always the case. I've actually heard, and I don't know because I don't play the game. I have friends that play the game, but I've heard that actually, if you look at soccer, some of the women's soccer players could probably hold their own against some of the men's soccer players and might even do better and everything. But that's a whole another game and everything. But I was just wondering.
Mark, you could become a great comedian. You're gonna tell me that women can play soccer just as well as men? Oh my God! I'll tell you, I was watching a lot women's soccer because in English Premier League, they have actually pretty good teams and pretty good women players. They're just playing different games. It's way much slower. It's not physical. Again, they can keep playing the game. I wouldn't even call it soccer. I would call it something else. But
well, that's what I just said. I mean, that's the argument about basketball. The argument about basketball is that they actually play the version of the game the way that Naismith and others created the game, and it's less of the high-flying dunks and a lot of the other things that have become more of the kind of way that the men play the game and all in that kind of space. That's part of the argument, is that the women are more fundamentally sound in the game.
So therefore, you suggest that the men should retrain and learn from women how actually basketball should be played, because what you're suggesting is that the women are playing the right style of basketball, but men are not. So men have to really start to figuring out how to play the right style of basketball. They have to learn from women and observe their games and figure out really how to do it right, right?
I'm just saying that the sport took a different twist, and part of that was because of the nature of how people wanted to see the game, and the game was a spectator sport, and people enjoyed a lot of that high-flying dunks and a lot of the other things that are involved in the men's basketball game and all in that space. So it is a consumer dictation that is the reason that the game changed.
Honestly, what Mark is saying is true. That women do play a more fundamentally sound form of basketball than men.
What is it?
If you look at honestly, the teams that won the actual championships, even in the NBA, they went more. Even the more recent teams, they went back to the more fundamental game of basketball than the actual star-driven, one-on-one ISO basketball that has happened in the past. That has happened only a few years. For example, Golden State in their run, they had a lot of fundamentals. The San Antonio Spurs, that was considered one of the best dynasties in this era of basketball, they played fundamental basketball. They did not play the star-driven, let me have this one player and just isolate that one player to play the game.
Denver,
even in this last run, was actually fundamental basketball. They had, yes, Jokic is one of the best basketball players in the league. Jamal Murray is one of the best, has played one of the best series or finals in the history of basketball. However, Jamal Murray had averaged close to 10 assists. Jokic averaged close to 10 assists, which means they're getting their team active and they're playing more fundamental basketball than the isolation basketball that people are talking about. So, yeah, what Mark is saying about basketball is true.
A quick question. I was following very closely this basketball finals, and I know a few things about basketball. You can tell me women basketball can demonstrate anything close whatsoever what was demonstrated in this final, for example, like anything, you can call it still basketball. Okay, they have a basket and they have a ball, but it's a different game altogether.
No, Sasha, what you're doing is exactly what Mark is saying against. What Mark is talking about is fundamental basketball. If you watch if you watch the WNBA, the Aces, for example, play a fundamental game, and they really were on top of the world and just recently won the WNBA championship. Honestly, Becky Hammon, who is actually their coach, came from the she came from the WNBA, coached up under Greg Popovich, considered one of the best coaches ever across any sport, and actually took over the Aces and actually took the San Antonio Spurs basketball, that fundamental game that they play. And honestly, the International League, this is why the International League of Basketball is catching up These international players are catching up to a lot of the NBA players. The International League itself, they play a fundamental fundamental kind of basketball. It's not ISO ball. It's more distribution, getting other people open, looking for, your open shot. If you don't have that open shot, you move the ball around to the next player.
Jacoby?
Okay, very quick question. Are you following European basketball? Male European.
That's what he just said. He said international basketball. That's what
Yeah.
I'm following that, and sometimes I'm making bets on European basketball. Now, European male basketball is very different from North American. I'll tell you how. First of all, they play only 10 minutes quarters,
Yeah.
not 12. Okay. Number two, they don't have as many tall players. Actually, very few tall players, really. So they're playing more or less a women's version of basketball. So what it means, they're very slow in transition. They very much
Actually,
they value the basketball very much. The teams that controls the ball, for them, the most important thing is to continue to control the ball as long as possible. And they're doing a lot of passes, very short passes here and there. And they are getting like 5 players around the basket, and they pass and pass and pass until the time is expiring, and they have to throw the ball anyway. And they're looking.
I'm not sure what version of International League basketball you're talking about, because, for example, Jokic came from this European league that you're discussing.
But he was
Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic, all these. The number 1 draft pick this year, Wembanyama, is coming from the French league. They're all tall. They're also good at assists. They're also good on the inside. They're also good at taking jump shots.
I'm saying the same thing.
I'm not sure what you're saying, that they wait until the last
thing.
moment.
They're very good in assists, European basketball players. They are giving passes to each other until they will figure out the weakness and the moment when they can throw the ball. The transition is very slow, unlike in North America. So again, that's why the score in European basketball, 150 points per game, it's an average, while in North America, it's 200 plus average, okay? So this is very different ball game. The transition is very slow, a lot of passes, and it's more or less positional basketball than anything else. And women here and in Europe as well, they're playing pretty well the same style. Why? Because they don't have star players like Jokic, like John.
Again,
They've got tons of star players.
You're actually making my point. The actual game of basketball is about passing the ball and taking the open shot. That is simple as that. And that's what happens. It's a little bit more physical at times in the International League. Yes, it's less star driven. However, that's also changing because you have Jokic, again, who came from this league you're talking about. Wembanyama, who's the number 1 pick in the draft this year, is coming from that same place you're talking about. He's super tall. He's actually taller than Jokic and actually skinnier than Jokic, but he still has to get ready for the NBA style of the game. The NBA style, yes, is star-driven, which, again, we're talking about the fundamentals of basketball. The NBA isn't the fundamentals of basketball. The teams that end up winning play that more assist game, just like Jokic, who you keep pointing to, who averaged almost a triple-double in rebounds and assists. Jamal Murray averaged almost a triple-double in rebounds and assists. That's part of the game of basketball. In the women's game, they do pass the ball around and look for the open shot. Again, the fundamentals of basketball. So when we're talking, I mean, the women's game.
I'm not arguing with you. Many things I agree with, almost everything what you're saying. All I'm saying is that the NBA style of basketball is very different from European and from women's, only in 2 things. It's a speed okay, power as well and transition game. This is a fundamental difference. That's all.
Here's a really interesting point. Now we're talking about, again, the women playing the fundamentals of basketball with the international league players are playing more so the fundamentals of basketball. And to prove Mark's point, which he's saying, when the women playing the fundamentals of basketball, if they had the same physical features, they would win in the men's form. Well, guess what? Who's dominating the NBA currently? The international league players. Where are they playing? The fundamentals of basketball. Luka Doncic, Wembanyama, Antetokounmpo, Jokic, all the European players that are coming out of the league that you're saying is the fundamentals of basketball are now the faces of the NBA. What are they doing? Playing the fundamentals of basketball. So that in itself proves Mark's point about the women's players playing the fundamentals of basketball.
It's very artificial explanation because any good team, not even NBA, but any good team in North America is playing fundamental basketball. Of course, they're all making passes and they're playing the fundamental game. So all the best players in NBA, they are definitely playing fundamental game. So I can't really say
Sasha, real quickly, we can get off this point.
Not playing fundamental game. I don't know such a team that you can say, oh, this team is not playing fundamental game. There is no such thing in the NBA for sure.
Yes, there is. Yes, Golden State played the fundamentals of basketball and moved the ball around. Denver, who just won, played the fundamental game of basketball.
And Miami didn't? Miami didn't play fundamental basketball?
They isolated a lot with their players. They took a lot of three-point shots. They didn't play a game that was more, they played a very defensive game. Okay. They were outmanned and outgunned.
Jacoby, you just nailed it.
They did not. They played more in NBA style.
It's all to do with the 3 points shots. That's where Europeans are failing. That's where women are failing.
Denver won the championship, and Miami took more threes.
That's okay. Fine. So they were inferior in.
It didn't make them.
But still, the major thing about NBA.
Yeah, let's change the topic just really quickly. Hold on a second.
Shots.
That's the end of the story.
No, I'm going to get to Donald Trump. But I did have a
and
question
then on top of that, real quick, Mark, just to take away this 3-point shot argument. One, Miami took more threes, and Miami made it to the championship by making more threes than the other team. The game that they won against Denver, they made a higher percentage of threes. But overall, when you're saying that the international league players cannot shoot threes and so on and so forth, or don't take threes, Jokic, the player who just won the finals MVP and was the top player this year in the league, actually has a higher 3-point percentage than Steph Curry, the #1 3-point shooter ever across the NBA, in his finals NBA appearance. So therefore, you cannot say that the international league
players. May I ask
don't
two questions? Number one, how old is Jokic and how many years he's playing in NBA, or at least in North America?
Jokic is what, 24? He's 27. I think he's played 8 years in the NBA. This was his
and
NBA
before NBA, he was playing for many years in America, getting ready.
I'm not sure what you're trying to get
my
to.
My point is that when you call him European player, and he played for the last 10 years or so in North America.
So then take this. Luka Doncic started at the age of 15 playing in the European League. So you're saying that, because he's played at the age of 15 on up to the age of 20 in the European League, but now has been playing in the NBA for a particular amount of years, he's not really a European player, even though he goes home and plays for his actual country and not the U.S.?
I should tell you, it's a natural selection process. As soon as in Europe, is any good player tall enough and promising, he is being transplanted in North America to play in NBA.
No, he still plays and represents for his country when he plays in once the FIBA and the Olympics come. Who are they playing for? Are they playing for North America? Are they playing for the U.S.?
No. But how many games
playing a European game of basketball?
They're playing almost 100 games every year in North America, and they're playing 5 or 6 games in international.
Hold on a second. Hey, Sasha and Jacoby, hold on. Just a quick question.
This is a waste of time.
What I was going to ask, and I was going to redirect the conversation just slightly and everything, is I know that you visited Dubai a couple of times and have had business dealings in that area and have definitely done a lot of work around the world and all. But one of the articles that I mentioned at the beginning was that the Chinese millionaires and the think the Indian millionaires are making a big influx into Dubai and Singapore, and they are leaving their respective countries. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts around that and why that is taking place, and whether we should expect maybe an influx of millionaires like Donald Trump from the United States and other places, or is this strictly a Asian situation and everything? Because I know that those are the two largest countries in the world and everything, and apparently there is a big influx of millionaires that are heading away to Dubai. I think Singapore was another place they were going, and other places. But as a traveling man, and I've not done enough traveling, what is your thoughts around this influx of millionaires heading to Dubai?
If you don't mind, I was actually going to say something about the gender differences between men and women in chess, and you said, hang on just a moment, Shaquille, and I've very, very patiently waited. Okay. So I would like to actually finish what I was going to say 20 minutes ago.
Go ahead.
I think there are differences between men and women that today's world seems to be trying to ignore, that somehow that men and women are exactly the same, and we're not. Whether that's how sports played, whether that's how they think about different problems and solving different issues, we just do things differently, and that's just fundamentally who we are. And I think ignoring that is really silly. As for whether a sport is more fundamental or more technical, or somebody has an advantage when they do things on sort of brute force, I think tennis is a really good example of that. The game of tennis between two males and two females are completely different games. Not that one is necessarily better or worse than the other, but I love watching females tennis. I think that's great. So, I think that there are just some sports that women are better naturally at than men. And there are some sports that men are naturally better at. But this idea that we've got to try and pretend that there's no difference between them at all in order, which is really what this conversation was about, in order to cater for the trans community. This doesn't make sense to me. I know that this is an issue that's in flux at the moment. We're going to have to work out some sort of solution. But ignoring gender altogether, I don't think that is the solution. Or trying to pretend there's no differences between us is not the solution. To your question, Mark, look, you've got a population of, 1.7 billion in China. You've got a population of 1.4 billion in India. And arguably, you probably have another billion of those Chinese and Indians, like myself, around the world that have a bloodline that goes back to those countries. It says a lot about both those countries. They both have currency controls. China's always criticized by the West as being, too much government control, this communist regime. That's what everyone talks about. But yet there's a lot of wealth that's been generated there. I think that people look for investment opportunities overseas. Sometimes they move. Sometimes they just want to go and set up businesses. I'm one of those people that has businesses in various locations, and I'm setting up an office in Dubai at the moment. So people look for different places, and Dubai is a fantastic place to do business. It's a place that I think you'd be struggling to criticize Dubai. I think that what Sheikh Mohammed and the other leaders of the UAE have done here has been incredible. If you look at what the UAE was 30 years ago, people would have laughed at you if you'd have said it would have been one of the world's major financial capitals. Or if you look around the hotel room that I'm in at the moment, people would laugh at you if I was staying at the Palm Jumeirah. If you said that was going to be built, people would have just laughed. So they've been very tactical and aggressive in trying to attract business. They've been very open to business. here. And I think the countries that do that, Ireland is another great example of that, of a country that has really tried to make itself attractive. And that's where people are going to go, and that's where money is going to go. I think the other side of this as well is that countries like Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, which is normally the recipient of a large amount of Chinese and other Asian wealth, have put restrictions on property ownership. They've put restrictions on business ownership. The United States has got several different types of business visas, but there is actually a restriction on an extended processing time if you are Indian or Chinese. So, of course, these people are going to look for other opportunities. And I think they're looking at Singapore for similar reasons. I think that you're beginning to see some developments in Qatar, in Kuwait. Certainly Saudi is trying to create a new kind of more liberal, more welcoming a country. They're talking about building that line, which is this huge, big, thing, which is going to house 9 million people. And, there's all these different things that they're talking about. So, look, I understand why the money's moving around. And I think that people want to move to places where they've got a bit more freedom and a bit more ability to enter into transactions without too much government interference.
Speaking of people moving and everything and getting into another issue, I know Shaquille will probably jump into this one as well as maybe even Sasha. One of the things is that DACA turned 11 and the White House is apparently calling for immigration reforms. And we do know that there has been another bus that has been sent from one state to the other. So Governor Abbott says Texas sent a bus full of migrants to California. So he definitely just migrated and sent a bunch of folks in that direction. So a bus full of migrants arrived in LA from Texas. But I'm just wondering what folks' thoughts are about immigration and the direction of our immigration reform, because apparently, like I said, DACA is turning 11 and people are wanting immigration reform across the board.
I'm confused. Where is Congress? Do we have immigration laws or do we not? If we have them, let's enforce them. If not, let's just abolish them. Why were we pretending?
Immigration laws aren't enforced a lot due because the businesses themselves.
I'm aboard with you, Toby. I agree with you.
And I think, what they're doing, shipping people to different states, that's basically kidnapping. Especially,
is it kidnapping if they're willingly going?
Really?
They're not. If you put it's similar to the slave trade in a sense, and I hate to use that because that's extremely hyperbolic. But way back when there was
is there a Democrat talking point that you won't go with, Jacoby?
Jacoby, you're talking about adults who are willingly going on buses.
Are they willingly going, or are they being placed on the buses? Because I just
they're being placed on buses without their permission. I agree with Jacoby. It's kidnapping.
Yeah, that's what's happening, Lee, and that's what the case is against. I think it's DeSantis right now, who sent planes to Texas to sent planes and buses to Texas to send them up to New York. It's all political theater, which is sad, and they're using bodies to do so. So again, getting back to shipping families to different areas that they don't even know where they're going and they just pop up there. Yes, that's in history. That happened during Katrina when they did that with New Orleans and they just shipped people, didn't tell them where they were going. They just dropped them off at different places. They did that, yes, way back when. And yes, again, that's why I said it's hyperbolic to say so. And yes, that's the term that's been used out there, no matter how much you laugh, but that's what happened in history. So again, what's going on with Greg Abbott? What's going on
in a sanctuary city,
like
in a sanctuary state, or a state that's not
it doesn't matter. You're not
to them being there. I mean, it really is in their best interest to go someplace where they're going to be welcomed.
That right there in itself is kidnapping.
Jacoby?
Oh, you're so full of it. That's not.
Jacoby, are we only talking about people who came here illegally?
That's not the legal definition of kidnapping, Jacoby.
No, it's not.
That's just a Democrat talking point.
So
and if Gavin Newsom really wants to play this game with DeSantis, that's fine. But don't say that what he's doing is political theater, but what Gavin Newsom is doing isn't political theater. again, is there a Democrat?
It's all political theater.
Point that you won't go with.
They're utilizing individuals.
Speaking of political theater, there is more political theater. We had the fortunate pleasure yesterday of having a religious leader on, and we did get to the point at one point of talking about women leadership. And apparently the Southern Baptists are voting to further expand restrictions on women as leaders, and they have expelled some U.S. churches with female pastors. So I was wondering what folks' thoughts about are in that case. This is a major religious organization.
We're in the middle of a conversation about immigration. I just want to say, Toby, the United States is not the only country. I know you guys think you're really unique, but the rest of us, especially those of us in the Five Eyes countries, also have issues with immigration. We all have, we all have to work out how we're going to address, how to do this fairly and to bring people into our countries fairly, etc. I personally, from the outside looking in, I don't understand why on one hand you're letting all these people in, and on the other hand you're making it harder for other people to come in. The immigration policies in the United States seem to be broken. They do need to be overhauled, and frankly, there's such an unfairness in the way that different immigrants, as I said, I've got a lot of family members that live in the United States. I'm very grateful to live there, but some of them have spent 10 and 20 years trying to naturalize into that country, and we see other people who come from a similar ethnicity but don't actually come from the same place as us, who manage to just jump the queue and get through. That doesn't feel good, especially when some of my family members are trying to get some of their extended family members over and they can't do so because they're trying to do it the right way. I find it just really baffling that when issues like that are brought up by people who have immigrated legally, they're shut down and ridiculed for it. And, I don't think that that's fair. People have a different perspective. So as I said to you before, you may not have heard of a Democrat talking point that you didn't like, but maybe you can actually just reflect on why some people may have an issue with some policies that are being espoused by your party, just like Republicans should recognize when some people have.
But Shaquille, hold on a second. I got to counter one thing that you just said, because you said that there are policy differences. We saw that with Haiti and Cuba. We also saw that in the way that certain Indian groups have this variation of immigration and a certain status that they are able to get and everything, HN1 or something like that. I forgot the exact acronym and everything.
Yep.
So that is also part of the problem as well.
I referred specifically to business visas, but there are other visa categories where there are, significantly longer processing times, or that they're just over their caps, right? So, but then you'll see other situations where like one group of people can come in relatively easily, and another group of people can't, who are actually coming from a very similar background. So there's an unfairness, and it actually does cause some resentment between immigrants in the immigrant community, right? If there's such a thing as an immigrant community, where some people will actually be quite resentful to another group, even if they're the same nationality, because of how they managed to get in. Look, I think it's an issue, and I think that questioning whether or not immigration should be reformed, I think that's an important thing. But I watch the news, American news from afar, and this business about this being politics, yeah, it probably is. When Abbott and DeSantis are sending people all over the country, yeah, it probably is politics. But to be fair, when Eric Adams says we don't have the resources for all these immigrants, neither do some of those border towns in Florida and Texas. And I think that was the point that those guys were trying to make.
So Shaq, what you're talking about in terms of the differences globally and so on and so forth, agree with. And the same thing in the States. The U.S. immigration policy has been broken for decades. It has been political theater for decades. And that's including both Republican presidents and administrations and Democrat presidents and administrations. It's been kicked down the street because, again, we have policies that, one, aren't enforced, two, get overlooked because we don't want to mess with the businesses that are utilizing the immigrants that come into the country. And also, we realize in the true nature of it, we need immigrants to help keep our country functioning, no matter how much we want to argue about illegal immigrants are taking all our jobs. Well, those undocumented immigrants are doing jobs that many Americans will not and avoid doing. And that is why. Let me finish that.
Economic debate, and I think
no, that is not up for debate. They've actually done studies, and they've actually had individuals jobs that the immigrants
let me talk. Don't.
Let me finish. Let me finish real quick, and then you can jump in.
Made your point, Dobie.
So, no, I didn't, Dan. So again, our immigration policies, yes, are unfair. Our immigration policies are unequal. Having somebody in my home who had to deal with those same immigration policies that we're talking about, yes, they are tough, especially, yes, when you're talking about individuals moving to the front of the line and so on and so forth. But I think what's going on now is trying to figure a way, because we have about 11 million undocumented individuals in the States, and we just can't grab a bus and ship them to a particular city and ship them to a particular state. What we need to do is figure out a way to work our immigration policy and help those tax-paying undocumented individuals that we want to complain about, those job-working undocumented individuals that we want to complain about, to help our nation move forward. Also, those seeking sanctuary in the States, we've got to fix these policies. That's the point that we should be focused on, and not demonizing and saying and attacking, because yes, I completely agree. It does create that animosity where if one person jumps to the front of the line, completely agree. But we've got to figure a way to make that work. We've got to figure that out, because if we don't figure that out, then we're just going to keep butting heads, and we're going to keep arguing Democrat policy, Republican policy. It shouldn't be that way.
But you've made the point, because Gavin Newsom says that he's going to charge DeSantis with kidnapping. So you've got to make the point that the busing was kidnapping. But let me just move on from that. Let me just move on from that for a second. You said that you guys need immigrants over there to keep your economy running, because the immigrants are going to do jobs that Americans don't want to do. Okay, and also the other side of why you need immigrants, according to people like Chuck Schumer, and this is something that we hear all the time, is that because you have an aging population and young people aren't having kids at the same rates, this is a way of replacing the population. That to me sounds like an absolute abuse. My own countries do the same thing and say the same thing. If people in America are not prepared to do the job, you need to pay more. Okay, people will do anything if you pay them enough. The idea that you're going to bring immigrants into the country and take advantage of them by paying them less than the market rates to do a job that Americans wouldn't do for that price, that is abuse. The second thing I would say is hold on a second, Shaquille. Let me finish, Mark. The second thing I'll say is that it is incredibly unfair for a country to have a situation where young people today are struggling to afford college. They're struggling to afford to buy a house. They're struggling to afford to be able to have the same sort of lifestyle that their parents and grandparents had. Okay. And then where market prices would ordinarily fall, you bring in an influx of people, and that causes prices to go up, and that keeps prices up and keeps that
artificially.
Now,
Shaquille, hold on a second. I got to back up.
Let me finish. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have immigration at all, either in my country or yours. But what I am saying is there is always a cost to everything. There is nothing for nothing, right? So you always have to look at the cost. And I think a lot of people who try to promote immigration try to do so and act as though there is no cost to anybody else, that there is no negative effects. There's a positive and a negative, and you have to be able to navigate that in order to come up with sensible policy. But you can't do that if you reduce people down to one little snippet and then call them names or start accusing, he's a kidnapper, this person's trying to destroy our borders. You've got AOC out there, holding a chain link fence, crying, and there was nothing on the other side of the fence. It was a car park. I mean, this sort of political theater is ridiculous. It doesn't.
But Shaquille, hold on a second. One of the things that you've raised before, and you kind of almost countered your argument that you've made before in everything, is that you have made the point when we have talked about the wage increase and those that want to fight for 15, that would be a problem with the business owners because they might not go that high. But then you just said that we need to raise the wages and everything. So it's like you almost countered your own argument and everything.
Exactly.
So,
I didn't
say
we need to. What I said was, if I want to get okay, so people talk about very menial jobs, right? People talk about menial jobs, gardening, cleaning houses. What did Osborne's daughter say on The View? Cleaning toilets or something, right? Now, if you're not prepared to do that for $15 an hour, I'm going to have to pay you $20. If you're not prepared to do it for $20, I'm going to have to pay you $30. I'm just going to have to keep increasing the amount that I'm going to pay you until I find somebody who's prepared to do it. But if you bring in immigrants who are desperate and are poor, and they're prepared to do that job for a lower price, what you're actually doing is you're actually taking advantage of them. You're not prepared to pay the market price. So what you want to do instead is you want to bring in cheaper immigrant labor. Same thing with farming, okay? And I feel for the farmers because what can they do? I really do feel for them. That's why Republicans were always pro-immigration and Democrats were always against immigration, especially the Republicans that controlled California if we go back 30 and 40 years. This was exactly the reason why, because they needed that cheap farm labor. I don't hold that against them, but let's just acknowledge what's going on. We have a situation where the workers who are born in the country don't want to do those jobs because they don't feel they're getting paid enough. Okay, because people will do horrible jobs if you pay them enough, and so you bring new immigrants over who will do the job because they've got other options. How is that anything else but exploitation and abuse?
So, you're saying that businesses are at fault for the immigration problem? Then
no, I didn't say businesses are at fault. I'm saying that policies default. When the government says things like, when you say, which is something the government says,
not paying
we need these immigrants in order to keep our country functioning because Americans won't do these jobs. So what you're actually saying is that you guys who tell the rest of us that you're the wealthiest country on earth, you guys are going to take advantage of some of the poorest people on earth in order to get them to do jobs to keep your country going because you're not prepared to pay people locally to do it.
Who's paying these people? Is it the government paying or businesses paying?
That's not relevant to what I just said, Jatay.
It is relevant. Think. When I asked you...
I don't need to think. I know what the answer is.
Let me finish. Let me explain and elaborate a little bit more to help you understand my point here. Now, when I asked you a question... who's paying these people? And you had stated that, I need to raise the wages and raise the wages and raise the wages. Is the government raising the wages to pay these people to do the farm jobs? Or are companies having to raise the wages to pay these people to do these farm jobs?
Jacoby, if you want somebody to do a job for you, you have to pay the price of the market requires.
So if I am having to pay them, am I the government paying them or am I a business paying them?
You're a business paying them. But
That's my point. So you're saying that businesses are the ones that are paying.
No, this is the point that I made to you guys previously on shows we've talked about unions, okay? When you keep increasing wages, what really is actually happening is that workers aren't getting jobs because they're being priced out of the market, because employers are looking at it saying we either cannot afford to have this workforce or we would have to put our prices up so high that it wouldn't be economically viable and it shuts businesses down. You can't have it both ways. If you want a 20% increase in your wages, the person you work for is going to have to increase their prices 20%. And then you account for higher levels of taxes that you're going to pay, and you're going to be worse off because of it.
How is that different than in the immigration situation? Because you said in the immigration situation that we just need to raise the wages and make those who are born here just work those jobs because anybody will work for whatever amount of money, which I completely disagree with, but I'm just riding with your point just to keep going.
Jacoby, supply and demand. You raise the price up high enough for labor, people will start taking those jobs.
Again,
that's true.
I agree with that point because it's been proven that Americans will not take these jobs even as high as those wages will go.
If you're a deep sea diver, okay, these guys go down there for a couple of weeks. Just let me say, if you go down there, it's a dangerous job. Okay, there's all sorts of health implications, etc. Now, there's not very many people. In the United States, there's about 3,000 people that do that job. On average, they earn between $80,000 and $100,000 a month. That's what they earn to do that job, okay? If you get the same job in another country, some of those people will earn $5,000 a month, and that will be a mega wage to them. What I'm saying to you is if you wanted to have fruit pickers on farms and you didn't have immigration, if let's just say the borders were closed, let's just say you built a wall around the whole country, you would have to raise wages. That's the only way you'd be able to get the employees. What you're instead doing is saying we're not going to increase wages. We're going to have all these conditions to make the country more expensive. And then when we can't find workers to work for the really low amount that we want them to work for, what we'll do is we'll import the labor and we'll take advantage of the poorest people on earth.
So again, that's all ancillary information. The point is, you're saying we have to raise wages.
Yeah, we're in time, so we got to break it and everything. I'm just going to say really quickly, because I got to mention something to you, Nick, real quickly as we wrap up and everything. But one of your favorite whipping boys was in the news, that being Harvard University. And I was going to get to the Miami mayor, and we can talk about that tomorrow because he officially launched his 2024 presidential bid. So Miami Mayor Francis Suarez is in the news, but Harvard is in the news because apparently the medical school morgue manager has been accused of selling stolen body parts. And I know that you are always having your whipping boy be in the Ivy League school, so they definitely gave you more fodder that we can talk about on tomorrow's show as well. They definitely gave you some more fodder to talk about.
Can you steal a body part? I thought it wasn't legal to actually own human tissue.
We'll have to talk about that tomorrow.
We'll talk about that tomorrow, and we'll get to that conversation on tomorrow. But right now, let's get on out of here.